March 19th, 1997, a helicopter climbs into low cloud above the Borneo rainforest. On board is the one man who knows the truth about the greatest gold discovery in history. He will not survive the flight. Michael de Guzman, chief geologist of Bre-X Minerals, boards a helicopter at the Busang mine site, bound for the city of Samarinda. Somewhere over the jungle, he exits the aircraft. His body will not be found for 4 days. 2 months later, an independent audit will deliver a verdict that shakes the global mining industry to its foundations. 7 words that erase $6 billion. 6 billion Canadian dollars, the retirement savings of teachers, firefighters and pensioners across Canada. The largest mining fraud ever perpetrated, all of it built on crushed rock and river gold sprinkled into sample bags by hand. This is not a story about geology. It is a story about 3 men who invented a gold mine, and a world desperate enough to believe them. Calgary, Alberta, 1988. The oil boom has gone bust. Thousands of energy workers are out of jobs. Among them is a middle-aged stockbroker named David Walsh, recently declared bankrupt, living in the basement of his in-laws' house. David Walsh has spent 2 decades as a mid-tier stockbroker. No major deals, no big clients. What he does have is a talent for self-promotion and an unshakable conviction that he is destined for something enormous. Walsh is 53 years old with no geological training, no mining experience, and no money. He files incorporation papers for a new venture, Bre-X Minerals Limited, a shell company with one asset, Walsh's optimism. Bre-X Minerals lists on the Alberta Stock Exchange at 30 cents a share. Daily trading volume, almost nothing. Walsh spends 4 years pitching the company to anyone who will listen. Almost no one does. In 1993, Walsh acquires mineral rights to a property called Busang, deep in the rainforest of East Kalimantan, Indonesian Borneo. It is remote, it is cheap, and small-scale prospectors have found traces of gold nearby. Walsh needs a geologist. He finds one in the Philippines, Michael de Guzman, charismatic, brilliant, experienced in Southeast Asian geology. De Guzman is not just a geologist, he is a salesman who speaks the language of rock. De Guzman arrives at Busang and begins drilling. He will personally oversee every core sample pulled from the earth. He will personally prepare every sample sent to the assay lab. No one else touches the rock, remember that. Busang sites along the geological spine of Borneo, an island built by tectonic collision. The region has real gold deposits. Small-scale miners pan the rivers and find color. The geology is plausible. That is what makes what comes next so effective. The first drill results come back from the assay lab in 1994. The numbers are extraordinary, gold concentrations far above what anyone expected. De Guzman calls Walsh in Calgary. Walsh can barely contain himself. 4.36 grams of gold per ton of rock. For a deposit this size, those numbers suggest one of the richest gold finds in decades. Within months, the estimate will be revised upward, and then again, and again. The gold estimates climb. 2 million ounces in 1994, 30 million ounces by 1995, 71 million by 1996. Each revision larger than the last, each one moving the stock price higher. John Velderhof, chief geologist and de Guzman's superior, a veteran of the Indonesian mining scene with decades of experience and a network of contacts from Jakarta to Toronto. Velderhof is the credibility that makes Busang believable. Velderhof presents Busang at mining conferences across North America. His message is consistent and intoxicating. We are sitting on the gold discovery of the century. The audience believes him. The market believes him. The Calgary Herald runs it front page. The Globe and Mail follows. Then the Wall Street Journal. A bankrupt stockbroker from Calgary has found more gold than anyone in the history of modern mining. The story is irresistible. The stock goes vertical. 30 cents to $5, 5 to 50, 50 to 200. Bre-X moves from the Alberta Stock Exchange to the Toronto Stock Exchange, then to NASDAQ. Mutual funds, pension funds, retail investors, they all pile in. From 30 cents to $286.50. In 3 years, Bre-X becomes the most valuable mining stock in the history of the Toronto Stock Exchange. Market capitalization, 6 billion Canadian dollars, for a company that has never produced a single ounce of gold. Barrick Gold offers to buy Busang outright. Placer Dome makes a competing bid. The Indonesian government intervenes. The entire global mining industry is now orbiting a single property in the Borneo jungle, and not one of them has independently verified a single core sample. Every geologist's dream, every investor's windfall, every promoter's fantasy come true. But beneath the euphoria, beneath the press conferences and the soaring stock price, there is a man in a jungle camp, alone with the core samples, doing something no one thinks to question. Here is how you fake the biggest gold discovery in history. You start with real drill core, genuine rock pulled from the earth at Busang. The core contains trace amounts of gold, barely detectable, commercially worthless, but authentic. What the public sees: legitimate drill core sent to independent labs for testing. What is actually happening? The core is crushed, and before it reaches the lab, someone adds alluvial gold, river gold purchased from local panners, to the crushed samples. The lab tests real gold. It is just not from the drill hole. Strathcona's later investigation will find gold particles in the Busang samples that are rounded and water-worn. The signature of river gold, not the angular fragments you find embedded in drill core. The gold was real, but it had been placed there by human hands. Normal mining protocol requires split samples. Half goes to one lab, half to another. The assayer should be independent. The chain of custody should be unbroken. At Busang, one man controls the entire process. De Guzman crushes the rock himself. De Guzman bags the samples himself. De Guzman ships them himself. The salting process is devastatingly simple. Drill core comes out of the ground. It is logged, it is split, it is crushed into fine gravel, and somewhere between the crusher and the sample bag, gold dust is added. The lab finds gold because there is gold. It is just not from Busang. What the assay reports show: consistent gold grades across every drill hole. What they should show if the geology were real: natural variation, pockets of high grade and low grade. The uniformity of the Busang results is itself a red flag. But in the frenzy, no one is looking for red flags. De Guzman is the only person with continuous access to the sample preparation area. He works alone. He often works at night. The few local assistants who help with drilling are kept away from the final preparation stage. De Guzman is the gatekeeper of the entire fraud. Kilbourne Engineering, one of Canada's most respected mining consultancies, prepares the official resource estimate for Busang. They rely entirely on Bre-X's own assay data. They do not collect independent samples. They do not visit the sample preparation area. They take the numbers at face value. The estimates keep growing. 2 million ounces, 30 million, 71 million. Then de Guzman pushes the number to 200 million ounces, which would make Busang the largest gold deposit ever found on Earth. Each revision triggers another surge in the stock price. In Calgary, housewives form investment clubs to buy Bre-X. Taxi drivers discuss share prices. The Ontario Teachers' Pension Plan takes a position. The Quebec Public Sector Pension Fund buys in. Bre-X is no longer a stock. It is a national event. At its peak, Bre-X is worth $6 billion. David Walsh, the bankrupt stockbroker who filed from his in-laws' basement, is now one of the richest men in Canada. On paper. Walsh buys a mansion in the Bahamas, a fleet of luxury cars, a yacht. He entertains on a scale that makes his Calgary neighbors uncomfortable. Felderhoff does the same from his villa in the Cayman Islands. Neither man has produced a single ounce of gold. Felderhoff sells $84 million in personal Bre-X shares before the truth comes out. Walsh sells $35 million. The insiders are cashing out, quietly, steadily, while pension funds and retirement accounts are buying at the top. The players are in position: a bankrupt promoter who became a billionaire, a geologist who controlled the evidence, a chief scientist who sold $84 million in stock, and an entire industry that never asked the obvious question: has anyone else actually tested this rock? There is one force even Bre-X cannot control: the government of Indonesia. President Suharto's regime does not simply regulate mining, it owns mining. And when the regime sees $6 billion sitting in the jungle, it wants its share. Suharto's eldest son, Sigit Harjojudanto, demands a 40% stake in Busang. The president's closest business associate, Muhammad Bob Hassan, is appointed to mediate the deal. In Suharto's Indonesia, mediation means compliance. The deal is restructured under pressure. Bre-X keeps 45%. The Indonesian government and Suharto-connected companies take 40%. And a new partner is brought in to actually run the mine: Freeport-McMoRan, the American mining giant, with 15% and operational control. There is an irony that will soon become devastating. The Suharto regime's insistence on bringing in Freeport-McMoRan, an experienced operator who will do its own drilling, is the one thing Bre-X cannot survive, because Freeport will actually test the rock. February 1997. Freeport-McMoRan sends its own geologists to Busang. They bring their own drill rigs, their own sample bags, their own chain of custody. For the first time in 4 years, someone other than Michael de Guzman is testing the rock. The clock is now ticking. March 1997. Freeport's first independent drill results come back from the lab. The numbers are catastrophic for Bre-X. Where Bre-X reported grams of gold per ton, Freeport finds almost nothing. Trace amounts, background noise, the rock is barren. The comparison is damning. Bre-X's samples show 4 grams per ton. Freeport's samples from the same drill locations show 0.01. Not low gold, no gold. The discrepancy is not a margin of error, it is a chasm. A Freeport geologist will later testify, "We drilled within meters of Bre-X's holes. We used the same formation, the same depth. The difference is we controlled our own samples, and our samples contain no gold." 2 laboratories, 2 sets of results, one telling a story of the greatest gold find in history, the other telling the truth. There is nothing there. The only difference is who touched the samples. The phone calls begin. Freeport contacts Bre-X headquarters. The tone is urgent. Walsh scrambles to reach de Guzman at the Busang camp. De Guzman is summoned to a meeting in Jakarta. He knows what is coming. March 19, 1997. The morning Michael de Guzman boards his last helicopter. The pilot will later say de Guzman was agitated, sweating. He asked to sit near the door. Somewhere over the Borneo rainforest, at an altitude of 800 feet, Michael de Guzman exits the helicopter. The pilot reports him missing upon landing in Samarinda. A search team will find a body in the jungle 4 days later, decomposed beyond visual recognition in the tropical heat. The official ruling: suicide. De Guzman, facing the unraveling of the fraud, chose to jump, but questions persist. He was also diagnosed with hepatitis B. He had 4 wives in 4 countries. He carried secrets worth billions, and there were powerful people who needed those secrets kept. The body recovered from the jungle is badly decomposed. Identification is made by dental records, but even those are contested. De Guzman's fingerprints cannot be matched. Some investigators will never be fully satisfied that the body in the jungle is de Guzman at all. On March 26th, Freeport-McMoRan releases a statement. Preliminary results from our own drilling at Busang indicate insignificant amounts of gold. 7 words that trigger an immediate trading halt. $6 billion is about to vanish. Bre-X hires Strathcona Mineral Services, one of the most respected independent auditors in mining, to conduct a definitive review. Timothy McCuart leads the investigation. His team re-drills the site, reassays the rock, and examines every Bre-X core sample under a microscope. The Strathcona report is unequivocal. Quote, "We have concluded that an economic gold deposit has not been identified at the Busang property. The magnitude of the tampering with core samples is of a scale and over a period of time, and with a precision that, to our knowledge, is without precedent in the history of mining." When trading resumes, the collapse is instant and total. Bre-X shares fall from $15 to 6 cents. The Toronto Stock Exchange experiences its largest single stock loss in history. In a single session, billions evaporate. $286.50 to 6 cents. 99.98% of the value destroyed. Pension funds, retirement accounts, life savings. The Ontario Teachers' Pension Plan alone loses over $100 million. The ripples spread far beyond Canada. Mining stocks around the world fall as investors question every resource estimate. Indonesia's mining sector is frozen. The global junior mining industry, built on trust that assay results are real, is shaken to its core. The RCMP and the Ontario Securities Commission launch parallel investigations. The charges: securities fraud, insider trading, and market manipulation. But the investigation faces an immediate problem. The man who knows the most is dead in a Borneo jungle. The Ontario Securities Commission charges John Felderhoff, the only surviving senior Bre-X officer in Canada, with insider trading and authorizing misleading press releases. The trial will take 8 years, the longest securities case in Canadian history. The class action lawsuits pile up: 40,000 investors, pension funds, mutual funds, individual retirees, a firefighter in Ontario who invested his entire pension, a teacher in Alberta who mortgaged her house. All of them trusted numbers that were fabricated by one man in a jungle hut. Felderhoff's trial begins in 1999. The prosecution argues he knew the samples were salted and sold $84 million in shares on that knowledge. The defense argues Felderhoff was a geologist, not a chemist, that he trusted de Guzman's work the same way everyone else did. After 8 years of proceedings, Justice Peter Hryn acquits Felderhoff on all charges. The judge rules the prosecution failed to prove Felderhoff knew the samples were tampered with. The only person who could have testified to that is dead. The verdict is a legal resolution, not a moral one. David Walsh dies of a brain aneurysm in June 1998 at his home in the Bahamas. He is 52. He never faces trial. His estate claims he was as deceived as everyone else. But he sold $35 million in Bre-X stock before the collapse and bought a mansion with the proceeds. A man buys river gold from local panners. He sprinkles it into crushed rock. A lab tests the rock and finds gold. A stock goes from 30 cents to $286. $6 billion is created from nothing, and then returns to nothing. The fraud was not sophisticated, it was just trusted. The geology was plausible, the promoter was persuasive, the market wanted to believe, and nobody checked. $6 billion, and all it took to steal it was a bag of river gold and a man nobody thought to watch.